Welcome back to a new video. In this video, we're going to be talking about how I made my Mirror of Kalandra in Ancestor League. It's going to be a bit different from the one I made in Crucible League, but for the most part, hopefully along similar lines so you can follow, and hopefully it's just as useful. I hope that this is something that can be applied to your own journey if you try to go for a Mirror of Kalandra, but also as well could be applied to, be honestly, any item. If you're going for something like a Headhunter, Original Sin, whatever it may be, hopefully these strategies are useful to you, and also as well the mindset and ways I approach things. I purchased my Mirror of Kalandra around 460 divines or so. I know now they're up to like 530. The league has been crazy for mirrors, so I get it could be difficult to farm for one now, as they're so gosh darn expensive. But I really hope nonetheless that these strategies help out. Even if they're used in the future league, they should be absolutely fine. So hopefully those are really helpful. Before we get into things though, I do want to have a quick word from our sponsor. This video has been sponsored by Soulware, who have just released a free demo of their new game, Talon's Blade. Talon's Blade is a third-person hack-and-slash game with a unique and tactical direction-based combat system. Set in a dark fantasy world, you play as a member of an elite fighting force called the Talons. When the Talons are betrayed by someone close to their emperor, you as the last surviving Talon must take up arms against this new foe to protect the empire and its people. Destined to seek revenge for your fallen brothers and sisters, you must travel across a war-torn land, defeating powerful foes who would stand in your way. Throughout your journey, you will collect powerful new weapons, armor, and magic to defeat your enemies. The demo for Talon's Blade is currently live on Steam, which is completely free to play. A link will be pinned down in the comments below, as well as the description. For my journey to the Mirror of Kalandra, I actually started about a week late into the league. For me, this was totally fine, because even though I had missed out on a good amount of investing opportunities or early sporadic money making, it didn't really matter, because my goal wasn't to really go for a mirror. It was much more in terms of just having fun, trying out the new tattoos and such, as people have been talking about them. And so that's exactly what I did. I leveled up, got to maps, and my Alcon going, which I'll put up on screen here, basically just consisted of some destructive play farming from Maven, some strong boxes, and I think a little bit of harvest. But for the most part, that was about it. I really just enjoyed playing around with the Maven mechanic stuff, just because, again, having a ton of bosses come into your maps and drop lots of specialized maps is great for profit. Definitely probably not the most profitable, but nonetheless a lot of fun. And that kept me playing quite a bit throughout the first section of the league, which for me was like a couple weeks or so, because for me, I never really did a lot of Maven 10 ways and such in the past league or so. So it was kind of good to get back into that and farm some Maven's Writs, which surprisingly, they're really expensive this league. So that actually ended up being, decently profitable. As well, this kind of helped me transfer into the second part, if you will, of me kind of like doing my mapping strats, which was invitation farming. And invitation farming was really profitable per usual. It was basically revolving around formed and twisted, although you can do the other invitations as well, it doesn't matter. But the reason why I did those two, and especially more towards, I lean towards the twisted, is just because I used a 4th vow Righteous Fire Juggernaut setup. And so because the 4th vow basically gives you so much mitigation against like smaller hits and things like that, because I was using like Divine Flesh and transferring elemental damage taken to Chaos, etc. It makes the invitations really easy, just because there's so many like high minigun damage attacks, more so from the Twisted, and so you can kind of just ignore them, clear them out pretty easy, and that ended up being a lot of divines for me. So after doing that though, I did kind of want to take a break, do something a little different, and this is where we kind of went into phase 2, if you will, as the mapping altogether was kind of phase 1. So for phase 2 of making money, and by the way, at this point we're probably around like 50 divines or so, this is from invitations and such, I really wanted to work on crafting. Crafting is something I really enjoyed doing, but it is very time consuming. It's something that is very profitable if done correctly, and there's a lot of ways to do crafting so-called correctly, right? There's so many different kinds of items, from Eldritch items to Conqueror-based items, weapons, shields, all this different stuff, right? Rings, doesn't matter. And so for me, I kept it very simple, because I didn't want to stow all my money way into crafting, because at that point, it's not very accessible for me to get out, right? Like if I have a ton of items waiting to sell, then I don't have currency to upgrade anything, or to use it in any kind of way I want. So for me, it was just a small investment into crafting, but it is something that I kept going for a long time. And what were the things I crafted? Well, this is kind of each to their own of what you like to choose, but for me, I chose some very simple things. which is ward gear, number 1. That's doing like reforging defense on ward bases through like your fossils. You can even use essences if you want a targeted mod, like a movement speed on boots. You could do your harvest bench if you want as well for defense, but I think fossils a little more superior in this case. Go for the harvest bench. And basically it was just kind of going through these bases, and I wasn't sitting there grinding at it for like hours on end. It was something that I just take like a couple minutes to do, see if I had something decent and put it up. So I'd be buying these bases for a couple C, and again, then putting them up for like a divine or something like that, right? Because most of the time what's going to happen when you're crafting and such, and this generally goes for most things, is you're not going to be hitting perfect rolls, right? You're going to be hitting kind of like, you know, pretty good items or okay items, right? Or kind of, mediocre to bad items, but you're still selling them essentially to still get a decent profit on them. And what will happen is over time is you're getting small in terms of increments, how much money you're making. And then you're going to hit the big one. And that's what happened to me. And it's inevitably going to happen to you as well with any of these things. So this will happen for like, by the way, with like Awakening Orb crafting. If you're doing like any kind of, like Awakening 2 mods together and you get a random like 3rd mod, eventually that's going to hit something very, very solid. Same goes with any kind of Eldritch crafting as well. Like eventually you're just going to Exalt Slam on something really, really good. If you're working like just isolating like prefixes or suffixes of an item, this is just how it goes. And so for me, what would happen is I would go, okay, 1 divine, 1 divine, 1 divine, 25 divines. And that right there is your really, really big spike. Because although you're making profit on like the 1 divine items, obviously the 25 divine item is really, really huge. Tons of crafting guides online for whatever you want to choose to make. But that's kind of the general purpose of crafting. It's just to kind of go through, get the average cooking along, and then eventually hit your jackpots. The thing about hitting jackpots, though, is often that can be very, very encouraging in terms of you wanting to craft more items and such, and you can do that if you want. But again, for me, similar to mapping, if I were to continue crafting for too long, I just get tired of it, right? So this is where we spent some time working on that, and you can do this with, again, that was just ward gear, but you could do this with essence crafting fractured bases. You could do this with Awaken Orb items, smashing, like, I don't know, Tailwind into Elusive or something like that on boots. I'm just throwing out random examples. There's a ton out there, seriously, that you can go and explore. So definitely something fun to look into. But if you don't enjoy the crafting scene, the main point, though, is that it's important to keep your mental strong during this kind of stuff because you want to enjoy what you're doing. There is an argument being made, though, for even though I made a decent amount of money off crafting, probably in the range of like 100 divines or so, which is, as you can see, like a big chunk of the mirror. The thing is that I enjoyed doing it. If you don't enjoy doing it, a very good argument could be made for you just sitting down and spamming out a different strategy on maps, or just continue the same strategy that you're doing if you enjoyed it. And I enjoyed invitation farming. I just wanted to do something different. Additionally, as well, I'm not that on top of it when it comes to things like super juicing, like with sextants and things like that. I generally am just not interested in that. I just kind of like put it in my strategy, especially with Alchemy Go such, maybe like a Scarab if I really want to force it, and then just playing the game. Because eventually, just due to playtime, you're going to be getting some really solid drops in whatever strategy you're doing, and that ends up working really, really well in the end anyway. So take it as you go, take it at your own pace, and you'll be just fine. So that was my second portion of making the mirror. We're now going to be moving to the third portion of making a mirror, which was heavily revolved around bossing and essentially creating a specific build just for Uber Shaper farming. So for Uber Shaper farming, I wanted a build that was just basically specifically meant for it, and basically could also do some Uber Maven if I still wanted to, as I do enjoy that fight, and also potentially some Uber Elder. Now I know I just said that, hey, I was just farming Uber Shaper, why are you chucking in these other 2 bosses? The other 2 bosses I did were very, very low in terms of quantity that I did. I'm talking like under 10, right? Practically maybe even under 5. It was like maybe 5 times a piece that I did each one of those, and the majority of it was done with an Uber Shaper. Why Uber Shaper? Well, because the thing is with bossing is that usually is you need that high variance, something on like Eater of Worlds or Exarch, right? Or Syrian Exarch, because you need the different jewels to drop. You need things like Ashes and Omniscience to drop. You need really, really big ticket drops. Well, for Uber Shaper, and even just normal Shaper, by the way, you're getting consistent profits every single run because of the fact that you're getting the Uber Elder Fragment. And the thing is with the Uber Elder Fragments is that they will generally sell like a lot more in bulk, right? So I would buy shaper sets. Yes, indeed, in bulk. So you could say like, oh, but doesn't it cancel out? Yes and no, because as much as you can buy things for bulk and shaper sets, there's kind of a certain point you can kind of see this like in like definitely really, really big quantities where like if you try to buy like 100 sets, let's just say, right, you'll be charged like 10% more than the market average or whatever it is, right? But if you try to buy like 50 sets, it's only like 5% more, right? And so you can kind of nickel your dime if you so choose, which I sort of did. But if you were to purchase them all in bulk, let's say, you know, like above the market price, it's totally fine. This isn't going to change like anything super crazy. Probably save like a couple divines or something by doing this, so it's not a huge deal in the span of like many, you know, hundreds of divines from here. Just thought I'd throw that out there. Good. So in terms of Uber Shaper, why Uber Shaper? Well, you get the fragment, but also the Uber drop is insane because you get Sublime Vision. Now the thing with Sublime Vision is that it's a really, really cool jewel, and it's a really, really great jewel to gamble. However, since I was in the process of making money, I didn't really want to gamble, and so what did I do? Sold them off unidentified, and they were going for like 16 divines a piece when I was selling them. I dropped about 3 of these, and that was over probably like 100 and something Uber Shapers. I did a lot of Uber Shapers. Yeah, that in combination with Orbs of Dominances, which we're going to come back to that just for a little short kind of like interjection and kind of step forward, the next step, is, you know, a very, very good way to make some money because you're getting the Orb Dominance, the fragments, as well as the Sublime Visions, which are just huge. On top of that as well, you're also getting a lot of Shaper bases. Now, if you have the stash space, you don't have to do this, but I did, is I was just chucking a lot of the Shaper bases in like 15C dump tabs and getting a lot of extra currency that way. That can also go for like Conqueror maps, things like that as well. So be on the lookout for that, for kind of stuff like that. But I get it if you don't have the stash space, not a big deal. It was just a little bit, a couple extra divines, maybe like 3 or 4, something like that. So overall, from the nickel and diamond that we've done, probably around like 8 or 9 divines. So something you can do if you so choose, but not a huge thing to do. So we sat in the Uber Shaper dungeon for a while. Then we moved back a little bit to the crafting stuff with Orb of Dominances. So now we're going to go into that. So once I was done with the Uber Shaper dungeon, if you will, after being stuck in there hearing Gaze into the Abyss for the 15th billionth time, I realized that I want to do something, you know, get a little bit different, kind of take a break. So what happened? Well, we went back to crafting, but this was for a much shorter time than the first time around. And what we did here essentially is we had around 8 or so Orbs of Dominance-ish, sounds about right. And basically we did some very, very precise gambling, if you will. What I mean by precise gambling is I was essentially taking bases that would have 2 mods on them, you know, to go and elevate something, right? But I would always make sure, and just by checking the trade site, I would do this and be like, hey, what happens if I land either one? Meaning, you know, okay, I really want to hit, let's say, I don't know, like elevated Tailwind, for example, right? Well, that's cool and all, but what happens if I hit elevated Onslaught as a mod? What, you know, what's going to happen there in terms of like my profit? Is it better off just selling the Orb of Dominance? And what I would do basically is just choose bases. And this was just me searching around, wouldn't take too long because the fact that most Orb of Dominance stuff just sells for more equal to anyways to the orb. So it was a great chance for me to elevate a lot of items. Again, not a huge amount, but like 7 or 8 items, which is a decent amount. And then either sell the bases as is, as in being like, hey, this is the elevated item. Here's your elevated Tailwind. Someone else go do something with it. Or continue crafting on it myself and just making it into a super solid, good item to sell. And that was basically kind of up to me. So I would say like 2-ish, maybe 3 of the items I finished, which is meaning like, again, just basically using Orb Dominance, awakening that with another mod, and then, you know, maybe fixing up like the prefixes. Let's say if I awaken suffixes a little bit, right? But otherwise that was about it. Otherwise, again, just sell the bases as is, because bases are always in demand for people to do exactly that and maybe even perfect their items a bit more, right? So that was for me, basically turning those Orb of Dominances from like, I would say, from the 16 divines they were worth probably into like at least 50 or so, which there was a decent amount of that. I'd say like 20 of it was done from like items and such, maybe even 25. And then the rest was done for bases, because elevated bases can go for quite a bit of cash. And it's really, really a good idea to stay conscious of like, hey, what can I use my Orb of Dominance on? Because definitely there's a lot of money to be made there. So once we were done with that, we moved back kind of into the final stage of mapping, which was the all-encompassing part. And hopefully you'll all stick around for this, because this right here is the most general part, which is really, really good because it involves basically anything you want. And I'll explain more in just a second. So for my final strategy, and at least set of strategies, if you will, kind of going into the finishing part, and I say finishing part even though we have like at least 100 something divines to make before getting our mirror, consisted of a couple things. One was some Harbinger action, paired with some Delirium and such, right? Also one was paired with a bit of Essence as well, working on that. A little bit was paired as well with doing some Wandering Path, getting some maps and selling those off. Basically kind of a trifecta of these three things, and also a bit of a combination, if you will, at times, helping get those last 100 something divines. Something important to note though, before I kind of go into each one of those, is throughout this entire challenge I never used any sextants. I would only use a scarab once in a while if the mechanic, like I really wanted to force it, and maybe some normal Zeri frags. Otherwise I would use Stream of Consciousness. So, for the most part, I was just an Alchon Go mapper, and for me, that's exactly what I love, you know. As much as I'd like to say, you know, like I juiced a ton as in like, you know, doing like super high quantity Delirium stuff all the time, you know, like 60-80% LA, or farming apothecary cards or doing magic finding and such. For me, that's usually just not on the forefront of what I like doing, you know. Like once in a while it's great, it's fun to break it out and do it. But for me, you know, it's a lot of work. And it's just, I don't know, just didn't, you know, not my cup of tea, at least this time, going around making the mirror. So I still said that we did some Delirium and such, so like, isn't that kind of juicing, right? And we'll kind of go into, you know, Delirium, Harbingers, and maps, which for me, Delirium, totally just doing the mirrors, taking a ton of mirror spawn chance on the tree, and doing those in combination with like Harbingers and such, and strong boxes was totally fine. Get a good amount of Simulacrum Splinters. Surprisingly, Simulacrums actually are a decent amount this league. Like, they're not insane, but like, I've seen them go down to like 30C, and they were hovering around for like 60, 70, even 80C. So those are selling for a decent amount. Get a lot of Deli Orbs, a lot of Cluster Jewels that you can sell off or craft or do whatever. And that was totally great for me. Combination with strong boxes, dropping like corrupted, you know, like 6-link stuff, which I was actually like selling for chaos, surprisingly still. Also as well doing like scarabs, right? Just dropping those. Although again, scarabs are pretty cheap, but it helped sustained a little bit of when I was doing some scarabs, just kind of a nice added thing on top. And then a lucky dropper, so you know, having like a Harbinger, Fraction, or drop, things like that. And basically, I was just kind of sitting there in the zone. Very simple for me. Enjoyed it a ton. Yeah, that was great for Delirium. Moved on then in terms of like what I was doing as well to Wandering Path. And you know, for both these I was kind of doing the Harbinger stuff, although I found the Harbingers to be a lot better without the Wandering Path, because notables are really nice, instead of having to do like some weird force stuff on the Atlas, like, you know, Kurak map mod stuff. So in terms of Wandering Path, it was just a map printer. What can I say? I mean, you just print out so many red tier maps, and for whatever reason, maps are insane. Like, I was selling them in bulk for like 8C or something like that for different layouts. It's kind of crazy. And with so many of them dropping, you actually end up making a lot of divines per hour, because again, it's similar to a thing of bulk, where you just get a lot of them and you're able to sell them off in bulk, and it is what it is. Selling them off individually I think would be a pain, so that's something I kind of stuck to, doing that. In addition to that as well, I was not using destructive play, but using the Eldritch, like, currency, or excuse me, not currency, but altars from either side. This was resulting in a lot of loot dropped. This is for both strategies, either from Syrian XR doing like a lot of your bubblegum currency, or either overalls, dropping things like, you know, Exalted Orbs, for example, right, which I got a couple of those, which is really nice, just an added bonus, but also quantity and rarity of items on top of actual Eldritch gear dropping. This is from both sides. If you can find Eldritch bases that are rolled decently well, they can actually sell for like up to a divine. It's kind of crazy. Like, you might be like, oh, this one has fire damage over time multiplier. Cool, that's like a divine or something like that. And it's like, holy bully, what? Granted, it's not necessarily, you know, like an always thing for all these implicits to sell for that much. But you kind of just have to pick them up, see what's worth something. Could be on the wrong base, could have bad rolls. You know, there's definitely some variance there, but it's something to be on the lookout of because I've definitely snagged quite a bit of divines doing that, which is really, really nice to see. So yeah, that's how we kind of came rolling into our Mirror of Kalandra. Again, something I didn't do was invest into the shards. Is it just saved up all the divines, sold off any remaining crafting stuff I've done, and that was about it. And there we go. That was kind of the Mirror of Kalandra journey. I wish it could be more focused, you know, and very, very specific on like, hey, this is how to do exact each thing. But there's also a reason I didn't do that. There's so many guides already on YouTube on how to do exact same things, or exact like strategies, things like that, you know, and different variations of it as well, because there's, you know, tons of ways to do things. And I have some of my own from previous leagues, and I kind of wanted to be this more like overview sort of video, because at the end of the day, whether it be like a Mirror of Kalandra, Mageblood, Headhunter, Squire, Omniscience, some one divine piece of rare gear, right? You need to have fun. And for me, because I was having fun, enjoying my mapping strategies, enjoying my crafting, enjoying my bossing, enjoying, you know, toying around Sanctum for a little bit, enjoying some, you know, doing some Trial of the Ancestors, that was great for me. And it kept me playing, kept me interested, and allowed me to earn a ton of currency. So I hope, more importantly than the strategies of like, hey, copy the strategies and do this to make the mirror, think of the mental and such, and how you approach the Atlas, right? To keep yourself interested in the game so that you can actually make the goal that you want to make, right? So that's something that would be the biggest takeaway of this video, so please, and of all those things, definitely take that away. That is all for this video. Thank you again to Soulware for sponsoring this. Their links will be in the description and comments below, and I will see you guys next time. Peace.